Well, for most of us, holidays are a time to enjoy with our families. But for those who are estranged from family members, holidays can be tough. Syndicated radio talk show host Larry Elder was bitter and angry toward his father, who he hadn't spoken to for 10 years. But all that changed over an 8-hour conversation when they finally got back together. He writes about it in his new book, Dear Father, Dear Son, 2 Lives, 8 Hours. Larry Elder joins us now. Larry, you and your dad were estranged for 10 years.
We were.
What was it that was so big that caused you not even to talk to him for that length of time?
Well, Governor, thank you for having me. My dad was a Montford Port Marine. He was one of the first black Marines. He grew up in the Jim Crow South, doesn't know who his biological father is. The man named Elder was the man who was in his life the longest, none of which I knew until my dad and I sat down after not having spoken to each other for 10 years. I was 15. We had a fight over something relatively inconsequential in retrospect. I didn't talk to him for 10 years. I'm 25 years old. I'm having difficulty sleeping. I can't eat. I want to just tell him how I felt. I would like to say that I thought I could repair the relationship. That wasn't my goal at all. My goal was to sit down and call him an SOB. He would call me a name. I figured we'd have a 5-minute conversation. At least I would get it off my chest. Instead, the conversation lasted 8 hours. He went from being this mean SOB to this inspiration during that period of time. And I learned so many things about him I never knew. When I unloaded on him all the things that ever bothered me, Governor, he said very quietly after I was done, I was a better father to you than mine was to me. My dad never said a word about his father, and I found out all the things about his upbringing in that conversation.
You wanted to make contact to get some stuff off your chest. When you sat down with him for what turned out to be this 8-hour conversation, right, who broke the ice, you or him, and started bringing a little actual conversation into this rather than just the confrontation that you were expecting?
Well, I think I did. I'm the one who decided to talk to him. I lived in Ohio at the time. My dad's in Los Angeles. I didn't even tell him I was coming. So I walked into the restaurant. He operated a little restaurant. My dad was a janitor. He worked 2 full-time jobs as a janitor when I was a kid. He cooked for a family on the weekend, went to night school at night. No human being ever worked that hard. That's one of the reasons he was so irritable. You try going 4 hours of sleep for a couple of decades and see what kind of mood you're in. You add that up to all the stuff I found out about him. My dad said when he was a little boy in the country in Athens, Georgia, he thought that the woman who raised him was his mother. Some kid in the neighborhood informed him that was his grandmother. He had a fight with the kid. He goes home crying to the grandmother. She sits down and informs him that, yes, I'm not your mother, I'm your grandmother. His mother kind of came in and out of his life. The mother had a series of boyfriends. Elder was the man who was in the mom's life the longest. My dad came home from school one day when he was 13 years old, Governor, had a fight with the then boyfriend. The mom sided with the boyfriend, threw my dad out of the house. He never returned. 13 years old on his own, Jim Crow South, Great Depression when unemployment was 50% for black men.
Larry, what was the relationship with your dad like after you reconciled?
We went from being not speaking to each other for 10 years to becoming best of friends. If anything, I became even closer to my dad than I was with my mom. My mom and I were very, very close. My dad became so sensitive and emotional and began telling me things all about his life that he never told any of us before. And I understood why he was so irritable, why he was so cold. My dad believed hard work wins. You get out of life what you put into it. Before you complain, look into the mirror, decide whether or not there's something else you could have done. And no matter how hard you work, sooner or later something bad is going to happen. How you react to that bad thing will tell me whether or not your mom and I raised a man. And I said, Dad, not too much pressure.
All right, Larry, how much of your dad do you ever find seeing in yourself?
A whole lot, Governor, much more than I thought. I told myself when I was a kid I was never going to be like my father. And as older I got, more and more my friends said, Larry, you're just like your father. Hardworking, focused. I'm very similar to my dad.
You know, it always works out like that. The people that we focus on, the ones that we think we don't like, are the ones that we end up becoming like because we focus on them all the time.
Absolutely.
Now, Larry, your dad passed away last year. I want you to talk about those last months of his life and the relationship you had and what do you feel like you will always have, no matter whether your dad is here or not, of him?
Well, my dad died shortly after I finished the book, and I would read passages to them. He began having a little bit of dementia, so it was hard for him to follow that. I don't want to make light of dementia, but one of the good things about it is my dad had a rocket sense of humor. I had a joke that he loved. I could tell the joke over and over again, and he would still laugh at it.
Gosh, I wish I had a joke that everybody laughed at all the time.
My dad and I started doing things together, normal things, getting his hair cut, taking him to the doctor. I took him to see a movie called Sling Blade.
Yeah.
And my dad always wanted to be next to a restroom whenever we went anywhere, so I strategically put him next to a restroom. He was so restless during the movie, I thought it was because he had to use the restroom, and he turned to me and said, "Larry, let's leave." He said the man in Sling Blade reminded him of the man who abused him when he was a little boy, and he couldn't take it anymore. That's one of the few times I saw my father cry.
Wow. Larry, in the midst of the holidays, a lot of families are estranged.
They are.
People have some real deep hurts. Give some advice to families who are estranged from maybe a mother, a father, or even a husband, a wife, or son or daughter. What do they do to start the relationship over?
I'm hoping dear father, dear son will give two lessons. The first is 70% of black kids today are born outside of wedlock. 50% of Hispanic kids are. 25% of white kids are. What do you do when you have no male role model in the house? My father had no male role model in the house. If anybody could have gone awry, it's my dad. My dad always believed if you're raised by lower primates, you should know the difference between right and wrong. You should know the value of hard work. And no matter how bad the cards are dealt, it's up to you. It's your moral duty to play those cards to the best of your ability. The second thing is you never really know what's inside someone. What's the downside in telling somebody how you really feel? If it's a relative, a parent, a child, a father, what's the downside? The worst that can happen is you can clarify your positions. The best that can happen is you could realize that you misunderstood each other or had some sort of fight over something inconsequential.
It usually is that way.
It usually is.
Well, it's a powerful story, Larry, and one that really will touch a lot of lives, and this may be a great holiday season to bring some people together. I appreciate your being here.
Thank you very much, Governor.
Thank you.
Appreciate
The book is Dear
Thank you.
Father, Dear Son.
Thank you.
Larry Elder.